how are you forced to comply with some of these different manufacturing standards or requirements from a state-to-state perspective?
So for me, I'm specifically seeing now in Florida is really they're going after THCA products. You know, anything that's really THCA, whether it's full flower or it says that on the packaging. Florida for a long time, since I got into the industry, has always used a decarb rule, but you know, with the whole THCA craze, you know, people just went and started selling it. In addition to that, I know in Georgia, they don't want to see just flower jars. They don't want to see the bulk flower. That's really what we're seeing on our end.
And from an enforcement perspective, you know, we hear from obviously the enforcement side, they don't want to see loose flower anywhere.
Yeah.
So, you know, if you are going to do flower projects, I would see products. I would suggest that they're pre-rolls or they're packaged to where you can't actually see the flower because, you know, specifically in Tennessee where THCA is legal in statute, you still see law enforcement bodies coming after. And, you know, specifically recently in Memphis, you see them coming after the loose flower. So if you are going to go down the path of THCA flower, CBD flower, whatever it is, it doesn't matter what flower it is.
Yeah.
They're just going to see it as weed, no matter what it looks like, as long as it does look like weed. So
They don't want to see the deli style.
Yeah, that well specifically that, right? Yeah.
I would suggest that it's both. It's pre-rolled and packaged. So when you send it to a lab, it's tested in final packaging. And I know that a lot of law enforcement looks at that, and so customer consumers.
So I think, with that as an overarching theme, whether it be law enforcement officers hating jars, whether it be this, deli style model, is it easier, well, I guess it's probably a function of they don't really have a field test, where it's easily distinguishable between marijuana and between hemp. And, from a testing perspective, Chris, as far as determining, compliance with federal law, you just mentioned that maybe it's important to set it off as a finished good or a pre-roll. Is there any other advice you would say for people that might be considering selling THCA, or something that they might need to adhere to, as far as, what I've been told is, time, light, and heat are, your ultimate enemies when it comes to THCA flower. So how frequently should people be testing this? Is it something that one COA is your ticket to ride across the country? You being the founder of one of the best cannabis testing labs in the world, what would you suggest?
And honestly, there's a lot wrapped up into that question, Philip. Yeah, I mean, it is a challenge, specifically with the flower. Obviously, we all are in this space. We understand what cannabinoids do in the floral form, and they're trying to cascade from the mother molecule, CBG, all the way to CBN, and during that process, you're getting all the other cannabinoids. Definitely maintaining environmental controls is imperative to that. Things like UV exposure, so sunlight, can create the decarboxylation into delta 9. But there's a value for THCA providers and sellers and retailers to understand that there is a cautionary need to test on a basis, and I understand that there's a burden on that from the cost side, but that I've had customers tell us, like, Chris, you're not our testing, not your insurance policy. So there's understanding that cross section is valuable for people getting into this space, but people that are proliferating it as well, specifically as it comes to THCA in flower forms.
I think there's an inherent risk too, right? So if you are a store owner or a distributor, you need to make sure that these products are tested, because you never know when law enforcement might come in and act on that. We've seen it in Florida, we've seen it in Tennessee, we've seen it all over the nation, really. In Georgia, which just regulate these products, is make sure that you take up that insurance policy, because it ain't that expensive. So
there's also a challenge in how it's being tested, right? Because if you're using gas chromatography when you're testing THCA flower, like Maryland, for example, just opened up their own state-ran testing lab. So there's a risk that you're going to assume that applied during that testing process, and you can get hit with a charge even if your flower is compliant. So you have to be aware of those risks, I think, at all times.
Yeah, in addition to the dry weight composition, right? So percent by dry weight. So there's a moisture determination that's done on when we calculate THC levels in flower, and that's always going to elevate your values.
I think the overarching theme here is education. If you're
Yes,
selling a
yes,
product,
yes,
you need to be
absolutely.
educated or educate yourselves. You can't depend on manufacturers, you know. I've seen instances in Georgia where in Georgia, they depend on the COAs of the manufacturer, and then when they, you know, when they got in trouble, something happened, it came back completely different, right? You know, I've got a store owner in Georgia that he tests every product that he gets, just for that insurance policy,
Yeah.
right? Because it's not worth risking it.
But even if, I mean, you know, if you have 200 SKUs on the shelf at your small store, even if you don't test all of them, at least spot test them. I mean, it is an insurance policy, and you can't claim, you know, say that, oh, the manufacturer did this, they're gonna be coming into your store. So you're gonna be the one liable at the end of the day, because you are selling it to the consumer.
So I think it's interesting because, you know, just in that, you know, microcosm of this conversation, and we can certainly shift the narrative away from THCA to something else, but I heard about Maryland, I heard about Tennessee, I heard about Georgia. You know, I know, you know, Nick, you have stores based in Maryland. You know, JJ, Bret, you know, you all have businesses that, you know, touch and concern, you know, many states across the country. Honestly, how do you keep up? I mean, how do you know where your no-fly zones are, so to speak?
Well, I have a really good attorney.
Me too.
I mean, short answer, as my attorney's on the stage with me, I mean, that is part of the answer is, you know, and more than that is pick your partners wisely. You know, in this space is, you know, if your manufacturer or your partner or whoever it is, if they can't answer some of the questions like you just posed to me just now, or they at least don't tell you, talk to my attorney, and that person isn't readily available, then you probably shouldn't be doing business with them. You know, the cheapest person out there might not be the person you do business with.
That's right.
So, you know, at the end of the day is make sure you trust your partners. Make sure that, you know, if they are a bigger company, that they're doing everything properly, because that is important. So knowing your partner, I think, is the best answer to that, because, you know, if you are a store or distributor, like, the experts in the field should know should have answers to these questions, because, you know, it's easy for me to answer that question because I'm involved in the regulatory affairs across the nation. So, you know, picking people, especially the people that come out here and speak today, I mean, those are the people that I'd suggest you work with. And, you know, I might be a little biased because I'm friends with them, but, you know, these questions need to be answered, and it's not really the burden of the store to make sure you're compliant at the end of the day. You kind of have to trust somebody.
And that's all along the vertical, just like Bret mentioned, and that even, you know, filters through your testing lab. You know, I've had hard conversations with people on this stage and some of the people in this room, but it's how they use that information to ensure going forward that those problems don't come up.
So if you are a, you know, regional or even, you know, hyper-local manufacturer of these products, and you necessarily want to get bigger, you know, what would you suggest? How would you say, you know, this is how you can build your business out from a regulatory perspective, or from a compliance perspective, or even maybe from a legal perspective? I know we don't have any other attorneys on the stage, but I think every single one of you plays one on TV from time to time. So, you know, what would you guys suggest, you know, for people in the audience that are maybe looking to build a brand or looking to, you know, increase their national footprint?
So for me, what got me involved, and to answer your last question, what got me into understanding all the regulatory issues that are going on is getting involved with the association. So really, you know, hats off to JD, because JD's really taught me most of what I know, and obviously speaking with you guys, you know, I've continued to learn and gain an interest in it. That's step one, really, is join an association that's already done a lot of the legwork for us, right? You know, when I joined Florida Healthy, when we were at risk of losing the business, you know, I got a crash course into politics, lobbying, you know, fundraising, you know, regulations, things that I'm doing right, things I'm doing wrong. And, you know, as a manufacturer, to grow, I know that, you know, the bigger you get, the more risk you have, the more you have to lose. So the more I wanted to get involved and learn about, you know, how to do things the right way. And I always try and pass that knowledge off to everyone that I do business with, whether it's co-packing, whether it's selling oil, or whether it's selling our products to their stores or their distributors.
And it's not, to JJ's point, it's not even necessarily understanding your risk exposure, but it's educating yourself.
Correct.
Right? And again, things like American Healthy, that's built into the core and the model of what JD has started. And there's value in that beyond just when you write a check. But
That's right.
That's.
So do you think that there's, as you just mentioned, there's value in that beyond writing a check? Do you think being a member of, any given hemp association is going to, magnify your voice or give you, a bigger, more prominent seat at the table? Or, is it important to, as we were mentioning earlier, know who you're doing business with? Is something similar to be said about the national associations that are out there advocating for hemp?
Yeah, there's a lot that are masquerading like they're advocating for hemp.
What do you mean by that?
Well, are we name dropping while we're having this conversation? Because
We're live.
there's an organization that claims to be a trade association for cannabis and hemp, and they might as well just drop the H off of that. There's a lot of associations that I've seen, especially as being active on LinkedIn, people who claim to be hemp advocates. In the state of Maryland, we had a woman who ran for Congress who put in a bill that she championed it as this great hemp bill in Maryland, and it was not a good hemp bill. It was a milligram cap bill. It was a terrible bill, and she acted as if she was a hemp advocate, and she has an entire, she had and was one of the board members of the Maryland Hemp Coalition, which has since been dissolved and reopened with real hemp advocates. So you want to make sure if you're going to be part of an association, that association is led by real hemp advocates and not low-key big cannabis people. Because we come to find out that woman who put that bill in was a registered lobbyist for MaryMed, based out of MSO, based out of Mass. And then she ran for Congress and luckily lost. But these are things that are happening out there, so you definitely want to make sure. That's why I love American Healthy. These are real hemp people that are fighting every single day for you. So
Every single member, every board member has a hemp business. There's not a single person on the team besides our lobbyists that work for us that don't have hemp businesses. JD's got stores. I'm on the board of the National Association. I have a raw material company. JJ has a large company. I mean, we're all in this for him. So at risk of promoting why we're here, I don't know of another association that's actually, one, gets things done, is effective with their dollars, and actually supports hemp. I mean, every other association is ran, look at their board, just look at their board. So, I mean, American Healthy Board is JD, myself, and Nick Warder of Herb. So there's your board. Those are the people that make your decisions, and then our state chapters are ran by people like this on the stage. So at the end of the day, going back to pick your partners wisely, if you want to protect your business and you want to stay in tune what's going on, you join this place right here. I think that's the simplest way to put it. We're highly effective. Maryland president sued the state, won. Florida's still work in process, but that seems good. Tennessee, we've regulated. Alabama, Kentucky, North Carolina's meeting on our bill right now, I think. So we're trying to do everything we can to protect the industry on the state and the federal side. What we need is more help. So at the end of the day, that's what we need is more people to be engaged.
And I was talking to JD about this before we jumped in the seminar. I was like, JD, when did we start with CHAMPS doing this outreach and this initiative? And I was like, he's like, and it was after the MJ BizCon. It was late December in 2022. And fast forward, look at what we've done through that, and fighting through an upcoming farm bill, fighting through the most recent legislative pushback against our industry, and it's quite remarkable what American Healthy has been able to do with its resources, with its members, with the industry that sits by and supports us relative to what we face on the other side.
I mean, at the risk of sounding like we're beating a drum, American Healthy, in my view, is the only hemp association that's really getting wins, back-to-back-to-back wins across the board. And there's also a standard bearer, I think, of American Healthy, where when you're networking with members of the association, you're working with people who are doing things the right way. As somebody who's a retailer who came in, and I was able to be mentored by people who had all the answers to all of the regulatory compliance questions, and to help me to scale my business, to improve the reputation of my business, for doing and being known for doing things the right way because of being connected to these types of people. So especially if you're just getting started, this is a great club to be a part of, I promise.
So it's interesting because, you mentioned wins, you mentioned, getting answers as far as it relates to regulatory compliance, you mentioned being effective with the dollars that go to the association. What does that all translate to from a regulatory compliance perspective? I mean, how does, an association such as American Healthy, help shape regulations? Or, what does that look like from an involvement perspective? Or, what have you all seen as it relates to, these wins or, any sort of policy changes or laws that, may affect regulatory compliance on a state level or even on a federal level?
Definitely the educational aspect, 100%. Both from a scientific standpoint, where I sit in the industry as an analytical chemistry lab, but also from the retail side and the in between, the bulk ingredient suppliers and manufacturers.
I think, our story needs to be heard. That's the most important thing, whether that looks like lobbying or lawsuits or, lawsuits being the worst case scenario, but, you have to get your foot in the door some way. American Healthy has probably 40, 50 lobbyists across the country. Those doors now multiply whenever we need to get something done. And, at the end of the day, it's educating and making sure that our position's heard. Just like Illinois, the whole state, and we'll talk more about that on the Illinois panel, the whole state banded together, and against 50 lobbyists, we had 3, and the whole state banded together in the hemp industry, and they were able to kill the bill.
And cohesive messaging.
Cohesive messaging, and that's the things that need to happen across the country, not just in big markets like Florida and Georgia, and, we lost Wyoming and South Dakota this year. Like, although not big markets for a lot of us in here, like, we want to be covered everywhere we go, right? So, the biggest thing is turning dollars into, opening dollars open doors, and doors help you educate and tell, the story of a $28 billion industry that came up out of 6 years essentially. So, and there's families and there's money on the line, and, we have to protect our right to sell, hemp-derived cannabis. That's it at the end of the day.
I think the more wins that we have, or the more active that we are, the more conversations we get involved in, the more we are viewed by legislators and lawmakers and regulators as a resource to go to where they can actually hear from the industry, and not just from the industry, but from the people who are advocating for doing things the right way. So my hope in Maryland is, even though we had to sue the state, that's the kind of casualty of war. These are things that happen, right? Things go bad sometimes, but we're hoping we were very reasonable, and to be able to go back again this session and tell them, look, we have been the standard bearer for what hemp businesses should look like. And I think having an association like American Healthy, and as it continues to grow, and as you all get involved and get engaged, we will be viewed as the thought leaders in the space, and legislators will want to hear from us state to state.
Yeah, and to that point, unfortunately, they're afraid of what they don't know.
That's
And
right.
in the midst of that, the easiest solution for them is to shut it down.
Good people make bad policy sometimes.
Yeah, and,
most of
and
the
that's
people,
where the education aspect comes in.
most of these people don't understand our issue because it is a new issue, and unfortunately, we really are at war with another industry, which is the regulated marijuana industry. And if we're not in those rooms preventatively, then they will be in those rooms, and that's the story they'll hear, and that's the only story they'll hear. So, losing a state like Iowa, why did we lose, or why did Iowa go to 4 milligrams? Well, it's probably because someone in the cannabis or the regulated marijuana industry told them to go to 4 milligrams. Like, that's how policy is made in a lot of scenarios. So if you're not there to educate people, the regulators and the politicians, then the other story will be told. So, we need to speak up as much as we can and make sure people understand that, the hemp industry isn't to be governed by another competing industry. Like, that's just not acceptable. So we have to be in those rooms.
People need to see our faces and know that we're not the industry that poisons children.
Yep.
Right? Because that's really that's the lie that's told. That's the big lie that's told in every state legislator, everywhere a bad hemp bill comes up, is this room is just full of a bunch of people who poison kids. And those are the
that needs to
stories.
be demonstrated through responsible operators in this
Exactly.
space. along the whole way, from a testing lab to a retailer to everyone on the stage here. And exhibiting that and demonstrating that in the face of a regulator is what we're doing, and that's the important aspect. They don't, sometimes they don't realize there's actual people that are trying to do things in the right way for the right reason.
And the majority of the industry is, and we need the people that aren't, we need to shove them out. Or they need to correct.
And I think that's what this association is doing. It's raising awareness. And I can tell you a story. I had Hillary Cassell, Florida, come to my facility, and she was shocked. She's like, I thought that this was just a small little operation, and this is, the hemp business was a bunch of pirates, basically. She's like, you have like real chemists and executives and board of directors, and she's like, wow. And that's what Florida Healthy and American Healthy is able to do is bring that awareness and education to our legislators that are helping write the policies, right? I remember even when we did the economic impact report, they didn't believe us.
Yeah.
They
Still
didn't
don't.
believe.
Still don't.
Yeah, it's this is a big industry, and it takes coming together and the grassroots support and everything that we're doing in order to protect our businesses, right?
So it doesn't seem as if regulatory compliance is just a series of checking boxes. Making sure your packaging is correct, your labeling, making sure your products are appropriately tested, only being sold to people over the age of 21. It sounds almost as if, true regulatory compliance is not just a function of playing by the rules, but also helping inform those rules, be a part of that legislative process, whether it be Rep. Cassell in Florida, whether it be the people that you've been speaking with in Maryland, Nick, people that Chris and Brett have spoken with on the Hill in Washington, D.C. So it doesn't sound like it's just a series of complying with state regulations, but it's informing that policy through active education. Is that safe to say?
Yeah, the reality is it doesn't matter where you are in the country. Obviously blue-leaning states will be more marijuana focused as they have regulated programs, but at the end of the day, these people, the regulators and the politicians aren't bad people. They just need to understand the issue. And again, if you're not there, or if you don't back an association that's going to be in that room and people that understand how to talk to these people, then you will get screwed. That's it. If you stick your head in the sand, you will get screwed.
That's why we're really glad to see this room full.
Yes, absolutely.
So,
thank you
all for coming.
I think we've got time for just one or two more questions. Go ahead.
I think with a room full of a lot of retailers, something
Got it. That's just got it.
I'd like to ask.
She's gonna check.
Oh, seeing as how we have, should be on. Mic check.
Yeah.
Okay. Seeing as how we have a room full of retailers right now, aside from not carrying products that are clearly illegitimate or marketing to kids, because that's the number one thing they keep coming to us with, I see a need for retailers to put up QR codes, encouraging customers to sign up at the point of sale. They're bored, they're waiting for checkout. Utilize that space. I saw some smoke and vape shops in Illinois. Applaud to the people already doing that. But in talking with JD, getting those customer signups and getting activism on being able to text them on the days it matters, which I want to help fund. And I want to acknowledge this group as an industry business as well, that I've done my homework. These guys are at the forefront. Support them. They're showing up, putting sweat equity in when we can't, and that's really critical to our industry. But what else would you guys suggest or key things people as retailers could be doing to help support these efforts?
First and foremost, thank you for the compliment. I think Nick would probably be best suited to start this as a retailer himself.
Sure. So, it's funny. Maryland went bad, and I lost 3 of my retail stores behind like really bad policy, and it was really because the truth is the smoke shop side was not getting engaged. Just like I think it was Brett or Chris was just talking about having your head in the sand. There's a lot of people at this event, I think, with their head in the sand that just walk past the table thinking everything is all good, man. Like if people don't get engaged, CHAMPS won't even be here potentially, because this is a huge industry that requires, to answer your question, we need your voice, right? We need everybody to show up when it's time for example, if the lobbyists that are working with the organization are able to put together a good common sense regulatory bill, you need a lot of people to show up to support that bill. So throw the I'm competing with the guy down the street conversation out the window. Make friends with the other smoke shops, the other CBD stores, the other retailers, and get them all to show up and support what we're doing. Obviously have them join the association, do roundup programs in your stores to raise money. If you're $2.50, would you like to round up to $3? And take that money and act as a pass-through and a go-between for donations to the association. The most important thing is we need voices and we need faces and we need stories, right? Like, I don't know you, I'm sure we can get to know each other at some point, but you seem like a really well put together person. You don't look like you're out there poisoning kids, and a legislator needs to see that you're just a regular person building a business and trying to do things the right way. So showing up is the most important thing. A lot of people are scared.
Yeah.
Especially when they're selling THCA flower and they're selling, if you have a guilty conscience and you're afraid, it's probably because you got something on your shelf that shouldn't be there.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So like you shouldn't be in a situation where you feel that way. And then we need to get all the people who are doing things the right way. And we need cohesion.
And demonstrate to your, obviously, we're all here because the customer, the consumer has driven us to where we're at.
That's right.
But driving that through your consumer, yes.
I have two asks that everyone wants to help, right? I say, money or your time. It's one or the other. If you don't have money to give the association your time, and time can look like, for example, shameless plug, we try to do news updates every Thursday at MCN, forward that email to 100 stores, right? The stores don't know what's going on, and the distros really stepped up in Illinois and in Georgia recently, and they're super, we really got to engage our distros as much as we can because they really have control over the stores and the products that go into them. But all the help we can get, whether it's creative help, if we could get ahead of things, and we talk about this all the time, on our association calls, is we need to get, we can't be reactive. If we're reactive all the time, one, it's going to cost everybody more money, and two, we could lose.
Yep.
So if we start putting preventative medicine in, which is, for example, a QR code in every store in, let's pick some random state, South Carolina, right? South Carolina's out of session, we're actually in a pretty good spot there, but it doesn't matter if we're in a good spot or a bad spot. Someone could come in with a bunch of money and give a bunch of money to a Senate president, and if we're, then we're on our back feet again. So the best thing to do is as the association grows, we're able to do more of this stuff. So, the dollars are important, but it's education to everyone else about what we're doing. Because it's not a problem until it is. I've been fundraising, and JJ's been helping me fundraise as much as we can, but the association really only gets dollars whenever there's a crisis. That's the reality of the situation. So, we have to get ahead as an industry and say, listen, I don't want a crisis. I want to get ahead of a crisis. In the fall in Illinois, we'll be up against another battle. So let's get ahead of that. Let's protect Illinois. Let's get regulation through, which is the association's job. And let's get preventative so that we don't have to, be here all the time, right?
And throughout the vertical of the hemp industry, that is where I think the one gap is. It's like everyone all the way, and then there's a gap down to the retailer. They don't even know that they need testing or need to get a product registered, or even where it comes from sometimes.
The reality is that if every retailer gave $50 a month, the association would have everything it needed. It's as simple as that.
Well, I know that there's probably a lot of.
This is like church. We're going to walk down the aisle now.
It's not quite getting to pass in the collection basket, but I think that's all the time we have for right now. I know everybody that's up on the stage would be more than happy to answer any other questions that are out there in the audience. Anything we can do to be a resource. Please do not hesitate to pull any one of us aside. We're more than happy to give you our time and our expertise or insight wherever it may be applicable. So thank you all for being here for this. Really, really appreciate it. Hope you learned something. If you didn't, at least you got to sit in a room with some other lovely people. So thanks everyone for being here. We appreciate it.
Thanks everybody.